Hey guys, welcome back for another lesson of the Microsoft AZ-800 series. Now, as for what we have on today's agenda, let's take a look. Today's agenda is what is an ADDS? So that stands for Active Directory Domain Services, for those of you who don't know. Installing an ADDS, and then also promoting domain controller and creating a new domain. So the first one is just to go and check what actually is the ADDS. We're going to go and explain to you guys exactly what that is. Secondly, we're going to be showing you guys a demo on how you can go about actually installing this thing called ADDS, whatever it might be. And then lastly, once it's installed, you're going to have to go and do something called promoting a domain controller. So more on that once we get to it. And once you're doing that, or while you're doing that, you're also going to have the opportunity to go and create yourself what we call a domain. That's how and when and where you're going to be doing that. Now that we've got that out of the way, guys, please remember to give this video a like. I am doing this series for you guys for free after all, so you can consider that my payment for doing this. And if you're new on this series, maybe also remember to subscribe. Otherwise, you're not going to know when I release the other lessons for this course. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's go and have a look at our first topic, which is what actually is the ADDS. Alright, so like we just said, what is ADDS? It is actually a role you install on server. So like we said in the previous lesson, we explained in the previous lesson what a role is. Now ADDS is one of those roles you're going to go and install. A role is something you add only on a server operating system. You can't do that on a client operating system like Windows 10. It can only be done on a server operating system like Server 2019. Now, once you add a role to a server, you're giving it a role to play on the network. It's going to give you or render you some form of service. So that is what you're going to have to go and do. You're going to have to go and install this on your server. It's a role. It stands for Active Directory Domain Services. That's what the abbreviation stands for. Not something you guys need to know for the exam per se, but it is going to make your life easier in the exam if you know what these abbreviations stand for. In the exam, they tend to only give the abbreviations when they ask you a question. And if you don't know what these abbreviations actually stand for or what they are, then the question might very well end up confusing you. Now, with regards to the ADDS, it installs the Active Directory software on your server. So when you go ahead and you add this role called the ADDS, it's going to go ahead and do a lot of things. And one of the main things it's going to go and do is it's going to install what we call the Active Directory software on your server. Now that software does quite a lot of things, which we're going to get to in just a second. So what do you do with the ADDS role? You create what we call domains. So you can go and create yourself one or more. Most companies only go and create themselves one. So in my case, if I had to go and create a domain for my company, which I don't have one, it's probably going to be called something like burningicetech.com, just to give you guys an idea. So if someone were working for my company, it'll probably be their name followed by @ and then burningicetech.com. That's what they would use to log on to my domain if they are an employee of mine or a member at my company. Now, with regards to the ADDS, or Active Directory, I should say, it hosts all the user accounts and groups for your employees or members in your company. So that is where all the user accounts and all the groups are hosted. So whenever someone goes to their PC in the morning at your company, assuming they've been joined to this domain, you normally have to join these devices to the domain first. And then when they go and grab a PC, which could be a laptop or a desktop, and when they try and log on, that username they're going to be typing in, which might be an email address, it might be the name, it might be an employee number, that username they type in is going to be on the Active Directory. Now, if your machine has not been joined to a domain, that machine would do what we call local authentication. It's going to go and check in the SAM on that PC, which is a tiny, tiny little database, for the lack of a better description, which contains all the local user accounts. So in most cases, that SAM would only contain one, maybe two user accounts with their credentials. But if that machine has been joined to a domain, it's going to contact a central point of authentication, which in this case is your domain, which hosts all user accounts. And on that domain, it's going to find the account that you typed in. It's going to find the password, and authentication would occur. So you get to go and create what we also call groups. So you can go and add user accounts into groups, something we're going to do in the next lesson or two after this one. So all of that's still coming up. In case you guys are wondering, that is still coming up. We're going to show you guys exactly how to go and create user accounts, how to create groups, how to add user accounts to groups. All of that mumbo jumbo is still coming up. So stay tuned for that. And then thirdly, you can create what we call group policies and then also go and link them to what we call OUs. Also something that's going to be explained in a later lesson. So for now, I'm just going to say an OU is basically a fancy name for a fancy folder on your Active Directory. So OU stands for Organizational Unit. And eventually, once we get to our Active Directory, you're going to find that these look like folders. Basically, it is folders. So it's a fancy name for a folder, and in these folders I can go and put a bunch of people, a bunch of groups, computers, or all of the above, and it's basically just a means for me to organize my users, my groups, and my devices. So if I have, for example, a sales department in my company, I can go and take all the sales users in my sales department and throw them into a folder called sales, which is actually an OU called sales. And these group policies are basically configurations or settings I can go and apply to those folders called OUs. There's about over 3,000 settings you can go and configure. These could allow your users to do something, block users from doing something, or just in general tweak something about their computer's configurations. So if I want to, for example, go and change the desktop background, the wallpaper for all the computers in the sales department, I can do that with one little configuration. It's one little policy I'm going to go and change, and I'm going to link it to that OU called sales or that folder called sales, and it's going to change the desktop background for all the people in the sales department at the same time. All of these are some of the benefits you get with the ADDS role. It's not the only things you can do, but this should give you guys a very great idea as to what you can expect. Now, moving on to our next main topic in today's video, how do you actually go ahead to install the ADDS role? How, where do you do this? Now for this one, I'm going to have to show you guys practically on a server. So let's switch over to a server. All right, here we are on my server. So this server has Server 2019 installed. It's on a virtual machine, which I find kind of ironic since we are actually going to be covering virtual machines in this course. This course also happens to cover virtual machines, containers, Hyper-V, virtual machines in the cloud, and all that kinds of stuff. All of that is still coming up in this course in later lessons. Now, at the moment, this is a blank server. I've installed server on this machine, and that's literally the only thing that is on this server. Nothing else has been configured. I think the only thing I went and did is I went and added a static IP address on this machine, for those of you that know what that is, because a server normally has to have a static IP address. Otherwise, it's not going to work if I try and add the ADDS role. Now, as I've said in the previous module or the previous episode, where do you install a role? You go here to where it says add role and features. That's one way. Another way would be to go here to the top right hand side in your server manager to go click on what we call manage. And there's an option here, the first one that says add roles and features. So I'm going to go and click on that since I've already got it open. Let's click on that. Opens this little wizard which allows you to go and add roles. Now we are going to be discussing quite a lot of these roles in this course. Not all of them are covered in this course, but there's going to be a lot of them. So for now, let's just go with the defaults. Next, next, next. And as we have explained in our previous lesson, this is a list of the available roles you have on the server. Now, as you can see, pretty much none of these boxes have been ticked. If they have been ticked, that means they could have possibly been installed. So normally, if one of these roles has already been installed, you would find the boxes ticked. The text is a little grayed out, and in little brackets behind it, it would normally say something along the lines of installed. You would also here on the left-hand side be able to see what roles have been installed. So on the server manager itself in the background, here on the left-hand side, you'd also be able to see what roles have been installed. And also here in the background. So if any roles have been installed, here in the background, you'll be able to see what roles have been installed. So that is something you guys are going to be seeing shortly. At the moment, nothing has been installed. Now, what does the ADDS role stand for? It stands for Active Directory Domain Services, you guys might remember. So we're looking for the one second from the top here. There it is, ADDS. I'm going to tick that box, add features, click on next. Is there anything else I want? Nope. You would notice it automatically ticked some of these boxes for me, like group policy management. That gives me the benefit of having to go, or having the ability to go and add group policy permissions and all that, like we just explained. Over 3,000 settings you can go and configure for your users. So that is definitely something you want. It's not compulsory, but they know that the average Joe needs that and wants that. So as a courtesy, Microsoft automatically ticks that for you, which I think personally is dope. So I'm going to go ahead and click here on next. Next. I'm going to go over all the defaults, install. Now, it's currently busy installing, but once it's done, there's not a window that normally pops up that says installation is done, nothing like that. So it is advisable to pay attention to this loading bar, because all that's going to happen is this bar is going to fill up, and then normally here at the bottom somewhere is going to be a very small message that says installation succeeded or successful. So you can see at the moment it says installation started on Burning Ice Tech-DC1. That's the name of the server of mine. And once it's done, that is pretty much where it's going to display that message. It's going to say succeeded or completed or done. So it is important to keep an eye on it there. So there's going to be a bit of a short quick time lapse here for you guys, just to speed things along for you.
A few moments later.
All right, and we are back. So there was a quick time lapse there, and that took about roughly between 2 to 5 minutes. It probably could have taken quicker. The reason it took a while is probably because I didn't give a lot of RAM to this virtual machine of mine, but that's fine. It serves its purpose for this demonstration. Now, at the moment, you can see there it says something different. It says configuration required. Installation succeeded on that. So now the role ADDS has been installed, but also in no way is it fully functional at all. It's not going to work. We need to go and do something called promoting it, which is still coming up. So I'm going to close this up, and there we go. This server, we have just added the ADDS role. Now you'll notice on the left hand side it says ADDS, that has been installed. And now here, previously there were just 3 blocks, now we've got 4 blocks. There's one here that also says ADDS. So as I've indicated in the beginning, once we started, you will be able to see on the left what roles have been installed in the server, whether it was you that installed them or another IT professional. Also here you can get a pretty good grasp of what has been installed. So let's look at our next topic, which is how to promote a domain controller and create yourself a new domain or multiple domains. Now, realistically, it's probably just going to be one domain. Very few companies have more than one domain. That is only when they've got, perhaps multiple departments that needs to have a different domain extension. On average, you're probably going to have one domain in your company, whether it be a big company or a small company. So first things first, how do we promote a domain controller? So let's go back to that server for this. So what you guys will notice is on the top right hand side, there's a little flag icon here. That is your notification section. You'll probably find it in that area on a lot of platforms, even in Azure or Azure as some people pronounce. There's an exclamation mark there, which means it's trying to get your attention. So if I were to go and click there it shows me this little notification. Now that is because I have installed the ADDS software, Active Directory to be more precise, and it needs me to continue the process, which is promoting this server. Now on the old servers like server 2008 or even older, you had to go and do something called DC promo, which stands for domain controller promotion, which is kind of it's exactly the same thing. It's just you had to go about it a different way. You normally have to go here to the bottom left to your start button, go and open run, and go and type in DC promo. Or you could go to your command prompt, being your good old fashioned CMD. You could go run it from there. There was also buttons here, more or less in this vicinity, where you could go and click on. Now, you have to do it from the top right hand side here, where it says promote the server to a domain controller. Now, as soon as we set that up and we finish that little wizard, this server is going to want to restart. At the moment, it is on what we call a work group, which means when I log onto the server, there's only like one account, probably called administrator. It's currently checking locally in the SAM, as we said earlier, for that one account. And as soon as I've made a domain controller, where server is going to be the domain controller, it's going to restart. And it's going to ask me to log on to the domain after restarting. And it's going to preferably require an admin account on that domain. And the admin account is normally called administrator. So I'm going to click there on promote. Opens this little wizard. Now, at the top it says add a domain controller to an existing domain. We're not going to do that because we don't have an existing domain. That is something you will probably go and do at a branch office realistically. So if your company has more than one branch office and you would like to have a domain controller at each branch office so that your staff or your employees can authenticate against that server locally in that branch, that is probably what you're going to go and do. The reason we do that is we don't want all of those people at different branches to authenticate to the server at your main branch, probably being head office. That is because the internet connection might very well be slow or unstable at that branch office, or maybe you just don't want to overload the main server or put all your eggs in one basket. Many reasons for that. So we're not going to do that today. The second option says add a new domain to an existing forest, not something we're going to be doing. So everything we do is our first server. Brand new forest, brand new tree, brand new domain. So we're going to start at the bottom option, which you're almost never going to do. Realistically, in life, in real life, the only time you're going to do that is in a classroom environment or a course like what you guys are doing right now, or if you, God forbid, are in a situation where it's a brand new company, which is very unlikely. Usually, when you work at a company, you're going to be joining an existing environment where someone has already done this. Your job is just going to be to maintain that existing environment. So for now, what do we want to call this domain? So I'm going to call mine burningicetech.com. Here we go. That should suffice. Next. What functional level do you want for your forest and for your domain? At the moment, you'll find that the highest it gives you is 2016, which is pretty much the same. It's no real difference here. Now, generally, rule of thumb is you always use the highest one that you've got available, unless your company has existing servers in their environment. Then you might need to go and check what forest and domain functional level is your existing environment using for your company or your client's company. You might not necessarily want to go and choose the latest versions here, Ben, because newer versions generally come with new functions and new goodies and new features, and that means that your old servers might not be compatible with your new server. Your new server is going to have certain functionality, and your old server is going to be like, bro, I've got no clue what you're talking about. So to try and avoid that, you want to try and keep them all on the same page. So for now, this is my first server. So if anything is your first one, you normally want to go and choose the latest of the latest and the best of the best. It just makes sense. Now, with your first domain controller, you're going to notice this box is normally ticked by default, and it is something you're probably going to end up doing. It's going to install the DNS role now as well. So you're going to configure DNS, and that is something you will want with Active Directory because DNS is a light role and Active Directory is a heavy role. They work hand in hand very well with one another. DNS is not normally something you need to go and install with any secondary or third domain controller. So for now, I'm going to leave that there. The password I'm going to choose here is my main password for my main account. It's not just for restoring purposes. So what do you want the main admin account's password to be? That is the one I'm going to log on with as soon as this server restarts. So as soon as this role has been configured, being the ADSS, it's going to restart this PC and it's going to join its own domain. That's pretty weird if you think about it. And that is the password I'm going to have to go and type in. So I'm going to go and choose a password of some kind here. Here we go. Type the password in there. Now, server by default has some security complexity requirements. It normally has to be minimum 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. Otherwise, your password will not be accepted. It doesn't matter whether this is an admin account like mine or whether this is a normal user account. Either way, you need to meet those minimum password complexity requirements. Yes, you do have the ability to go and change that. Normally, we don't go and reduce that, we increase that. Instead of it being minimum 8 characters, you could make it 10 characters, 12 characters. You can go and change all kinds of aspects about the security regarding passwords. So normally we just go and make it more secure, not less secure. I'm going to go ahead and click on next. Going to go over all the defaults. That is just to give you a heads up, nothing to worry about at this point in time. Next, next, next. So that's basically just where it's going to store all your files. Tiny little database for the most part. We're not going to be concerned about that. So everybody just normally leaves that on the default location, and I would encourage you to do so. So do not go and fiddle with that for now. More on that later. We can explain that later. So for now, leave that on a default. That's pretty much what you're going to do 99% of the time. Next, just a summary, a review. Next. Now what's going to happen here is it's going to check whether I meet the prerequisites. Now, some of them are going to be green ticks. Some of them might be a yellow exclamation mark. An exclamation mark does not mean it's not going to work. It just means it's trying to draw your attention, and it may or may not be something you still need to go and set up later. But in most cases, it's something I don't even need to go and set up. For example, this server needs to have a static IP address. And if it did not have one, you would have probably found that one of these would not be an exclamation mark. It probably would have been a red cross, which tells me I cannot complete this wizard until I go and give this server a fixed static IP address that does not change. So for now, I've just got exclamation marks and green ticks, which means we're good to go. I'm just going to click on install. And I'm going to do a quick time lapse here for you guys just to speed things along again.
One eternity later.
Alright guys, here we are. You will notice this is a different screen. And the reason for that is because my server just went and automatically restarted. I did mention earlier that it was going to go and do that. So it didn't even give me time to start the recording before it actually went and did that. But that's fine. So as you start promoting your computer, while it's doing that procedure, as soon as it finishes, it's automatically going to restart your server. It's going to take you to the logon screen, which is where we are now. Normally, you would log on with your local user account, which is going to go and check in the SAM, as we've explained earlier. This time around, we are going to log on to our domain. Now, we don't have any accounts yet on the domain besides the default built-in accounts like the administrator account. And you would remember when we were busy creating our domain, we had to go and choose a password at one point, and that's the one I'm going to be using. Now, at the moment, normally here at the bottom, it'll tell you where you're logging on to, whether it's your local machine or your domain. Now, unfortunately for me, my server happens to be called Burning Ice Tech, and my domain is also called Burning Ice Tech, except my domain is called burningicetech.com. So I think mine is probably going to log on to the local machine. I don't want that. So to force it to log on to either the local machine or the domain, you start off by typing the location which you want to log on to. So in my case, I want to log on to my domain. So I'm going to go and type that in, burningicetech.com. So you type in the location's name which you want to log on to, followed by a backslash. There we go. So you can see it actually changed to burningicetech.com. Now I know I'm logging onto the domain. Now you just type in a username on that domain, and we only have like the one. So I'm just going to go and type in administrator, followed by the password I chose earlier. And I'm going to go hit and enter. And it's going to log on for the very first time onto the server. Alright, and here we are logged on to our server for the very first time. It took a while to start up, probably because I didn't give it a lot of RAM, so it's taking its sweet time to do things. Now, as you can see, there's a few events obviously that took place, and on the left hand side, we now have the ADS role as well as the DNS role installed. You can also see them here on the little panel. DNS and ADS, both of them have been installed. Now, by default, as I've explained earlier, this server will go and join its own domain automatically, but from this point forward, any additional servers or client computers you would like to join to this domain, you're going to have to go and do that manually. So that server or that client computer has to be on the same network. You have to physically plug them to the same network with an Ethernet cable or join them to that hotspot or Wi-Fi network. Make sure the IP configuration is correct. And once you've done that, it's going to prompt you for a username and a password, an administrator username and password. That is just to make sure you are indeed a member or an employee of that organization, but not just that, that you're actually authorized to join that device to that domain. Otherwise, maybe I do work for that company, but I want to go and join my own personal device to this company's domain so I can go and steal certain information, steal licenses, or something like that. So generally, it's not just to make sure you're part of the company, it's also to make sure you're actually allowed to join your devices. Now, just to show you, before we end things, that this machine is actually joined to the domain, I'm going to go here to Explorer, right click on this PC, Properties, and there we have it. So you can see here it would normally say work group, and the work group's default name would probably be work group. Now it doesn't say work group, it says domain, and it says it's been joined to Burning Ice Tech. Now, one way you can join another server to this domain or a client computer would be to go here to change settings. You click on change, and here you would normally have the ability to go and join it to a domain. Now mine is not going to do that because I'm already joined to the domain. So we're going to ignore that for now. Alright guys, so if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you've got any questions about this specific topic, feel free to drop those questions down below in the comment section. And then just also as an extra, let me know if you've ever worked on a domain controller, specifically on Active Directory. So if you have worked on Active Directory, just for fun for thought, you don't need to mention the company's name, obviously. So just mention how many users you have in your Active Directory. So if any of you guys are currently managing Active Directory, or if you have managed Active Directory, just for the fun of it, mention how much experience you've got. I suppose you can leave that part out if you want to, and how many users you need to go and look after in your respective company. You don't need to give away any sensitive information. I prefer that you guys don't. Maybe don't mention your company's name. You don't even need to mention your name. Just say how many users you're looking after. Please do not mention anything confidential, just for security reasons. Alright guys, so like I said, give the video a like. That is basically my payment. If you are new to this series on my channel and you would like to know when I release new free content, feel free to go and hit that subscribe button with the notification bell. And I thank you, and I will see you guys on episode 4 of the AZ-800 course.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me.